The Accidental Entrepreneur is brought to you with the help of our sponsor, AWeber, the world's leading small business email marketing and automation service provider. Since 1998, AWeber has helped more than 1 million small businesses and entrepreneurs through its suite of web-based email marketing, automation tools, and education. AWeber, the best option when it comes to marketing your business. The podcast is also brought to you by the Alternative Board. Since 1989, the Alternative Board, or TAB, has been one of the leading peer advisory and business coaching organizations for independent business owners and CEOs across the world. By facilitating peer advisory boards, private one-on-one coaching, and strategic planning services, TAB helps business owners improve their businesses in ways that change their lives. And be sure to connect with our affiliate sponsor, GSM Growth Agency. They're boosting e-commerce businesses to 6 and 7 figures in revenue and cover everything from ads and social media influencers to making your website better. GSM Growth Agency focuses on taking businesses from startup success to bigger success, going above and beyond to make sure growth sticks around. They're all about cool ideas, lasting partnerships, and making your mark in the e-commerce world. And be sure to support the podcast by ordering some logo merchandise from our online store. Listen to all of our sponsors' commercials later in this episode and follow their links in the show notes to learn more about their products and services. All right, welcome everybody back to another episode of the podcast. I'm Mitch Beinhacker, your host. Got another great guest today. We're going to be talking about Dominic and learn about his beverage company. I love it when we get somebody on with like real, hard products that you can like go out and try, at least if you're in the New York area. But I think you can order it online too. We'll talk to Dominic in a minute. So if you're listening on your favorite directory and you can leave us a review, leave us a 5-star review. If you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, like the channel, so we can keep connecting with cool guys like Dominic. So let's get on with the show.
The information provided in these episodes is for entertainment purposes only. It is not a guarantee of success or to be construed as advice of any kind. You should always seek advice from local licensed professionals before making any decisions.
The dictionary defines an entrepreneur as a person who organizes and manages any enterprise, especially a business, usually with considerable initiative and risk. People often start a business without much choice, perhaps due to a job loss or just being dissatisfied at work, and they come up with an idea they just know can be successful. They become entrepreneurs by accident. That is to say, their success or failure happens by accident, not with intention. My name is Mitch Beinhacker. I'm a corporate attorney and a business advisor. You're listening to The Accidental Entrepreneur, my podcast about how to achieve success on purpose, not by accident. Join me along with our monthly guests, where we share our knowledge and help you get a hold of your business. And now on to today's episode. All right, Dominic, so welcome to the show. It's always good to connect with local guys. I have no recollection how we connected. Could have been through Podmatch or a booking agency or something like that. But either way, we're both in the Northeast, freezing our ass off. Luckily, we're inside. And what is it, like 12 by you or something? It's like 20 here in New Jersey.
Yeah, it says, I think it's 20, but the thing says it feels like 10 degrees.
Yeah,
it's freezing. It's cold regardless.
yeah, absolutely. All right. So why don't we do this? We're going to talk about it's dirty water hard seltzer, right? We're going to talk about that maybe later in the show. We'll get into the whole product, but why don't we go backwards and talk about, your background in business? And we were talking about the accidental entrepreneur. Everybody wants to bring that up, how they accidentally fell into business. You also have a pretty strong tech background, right? Because you were in gaming and all kinds of stuff like that. So maybe you fill us in on your background.
My background's definitely pretty diverse. I think, so in college, I went to school. Actually jumped around majors like a lot, as not many people, but some people do. I jumped around a bunch of majors. My first major was like computer engineering. And then I was like, this is not for me. Went to business, which I was like, okay, this feels a lot more natural, but so natural that I don't feel like I'm learning much.
Right,
then got into like marketing, some other things. And then I actually switched schools to FIT, where I studied fashion merchandising, which I thought was really cool. And then, so right after college, I was in the fashion space doing styling and merchandising. I always had an affinity for business-related things. I always liked knowing about the business side, the data, the sort of like, growth trajectory, numbers to hit, which I always found very fascinating.
FIT is in the garment district in the city, right?
Yes, it's on 27th and 7th.
Got it, right. That's what I thought. Okay.
So I was doing that for a bit. And then during this time, I actually started working with a co-founder at the time on some digital products, so digital apps in the fashion space, and that's kind of how I even started getting into the tech space itself, not knowing anything about tech or product or UI UX. And then from there, then I was kind of leapfrogging a little bit, doing these sort of like entrepreneurial endeavors in the app space, and then I finally joined an actual company with structure in the tech space, and that
like
was my
benefits
first.
and things like that.
Yep.
So
And so
Dominic,
that's
what are like apps for, what are digital apps for the fashion space? Is it like M-Tailor where you like stand up and it measured you, or what kind of apps were we talking about?
This was more on the editorial side. So this was back in, I'd say 2014, 2015, when the Instagram bubble really started coming about. And there was this big fissure between your traditional print media and the digital space, right? And what we wanted to do was create something that was an in between like your magazine editorialized content and Instagram, right? And we wanted to keep editorial content alive through a new means of ingesting content. This we found very difficult, not from like the way that you ingested the content, but it really is a two-sided marketplace where you needed the content creators as well as the viewers. I know a lot more now about these two-sided marketplaces that I think if I went back, I would have done things very differently. But yeah, we were both very unfamiliar with building apps, where we're kind of, freestyling design on the fly. May not have been the most optimal in terms of UI UX, but it was my first learning experience really with.
No, I was just curious as to what these things look like. Okay, so now you're at your company, you got benefits, they're paying you salary, actually making money. That was a gaming company, you said, or no?
Yeah, so I joined a gaming company in 2018. It was out in the Bay, so I actually moved out to the Bay for it. It was a subsidiary of a larger ad network. So the ad network was called App11. App11 is a large mobile-first ad network, and then we were a mobile gaming publisher. So what we would do is we would work with a lot of developers, whether it's to buy their games or partner with them on their games, to fix them up, get them monetized, and then scale them up for them with the resources that they don't have, similar to like a book publisher. Right. And so, yeah, we were doing that for a bit, and I really, really enjoyed that.
Dominic, you did the marketing for that? You weren't the programmer. You weren't doing programming.
No, yeah. So I was, my focuses were performance marketing, product, and operations there. So I was really kind of like 360 on that like business side and just like, optimizing and growing and scaling the games.
Okay, got it. So your background really isn't that off of where you are now, because they're operations, they're systems, running companies, marketing, all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't matter what you're selling. Yeah. It ends up being pretty similar.
Yeah. And so I was very early in at the subsidiary. So, and this is what I really liked, is having that sort of like entrepreneurial sort of reach into being able to touch like every different department, right? Being able to
freedom,
kind of like, be on the ground, try different things, be scrappy, right? And we had structure and resources behind us, so where we were allowed to make mistakes, we were allowed to like try different things and just like see how we can grow games.
Right. But it wasn't like a large corporation where you had to send out your work to the marketing committee and then they would come back and it would take forever. Right. Of course.
Very fast, very nimble. Able to make decisions on the fly. Didn't have like a huge hierarchy of like approvals, right? So we were able to move very fast, which is what I enjoyed and which is what I like in terms of, the entrepreneurial essence is you're able to move fast.
No, some people have it in their blood. I had the same problem. I was going to go to business school, get my MBA, and I'm like, well, why would I do that? Small business, and it just didn't make sense to me. So that's why I ended up going to law school. So I felt I should know the law.
I always say like in my new business that I have now, definitely more of the founder type than the CEO type. We'll see if I shape up to be a good CEO or not, but definitely the founder type, right?
It's definitely, yeah. I think that's a good thing for you to recognize that it may be a skill that you have to learn. I think if you recognize it early on as a founder, you can grow into the CEO that your company needs. I think there's a lot of people that just think it's the same job. And it's
very
not and you're already know operations and all that kind of stuff. So that as companies build and grow, scaling becomes a problem when you're not, building it the right way and setting it up the right way and having the right people in the right seats. So maybe that's a good thing they
Absolutely.
recognize that.
Yeah, I think it's funny, when people think about becoming an entrepreneur, like when I was younger, in like my early 20s,
Right.
everyone I talked to is like, yeah, I want to be an entrepreneur. I hate working for somebody, I hate a boss. I want to do what I want. And it's like, that's not the mentality, because at the end of the day, you always work for somebody, right? I actually pay my advisors so I can work for them. It's like, tell me what to do. Right. So like at the end of the day, you want someone to like kind of guide you and hold you accountable for decisions that you're
Right. I
making.
mean, freedom's not always good.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to be self-obedient. You do need accountability partners. I'm big on advisors, even if you don't have an advisory board for your company, you at least have one or two people that you seek advice from, and then eventually build up some sort of an advisory board. I think that's important for a company. But yeah, it's being an entrepreneur is harder than working for a company. You have all the risk and all the reward, right? But you work harder. You and I both know that, right? You work harder than you do if you had a job 9 to 5, you come home, and you just decompress. You're thinking about it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So
yeah.
it's
Like
just not for everybody.
If I went to business school, I would probably sit in a cushy EIR job with like some like internal fund, right? Or some internal like venture arm.
Or you would have gone to work for McKinsey or something like that, or Bain Capital or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, it would be totally not. You'd have the problems that you don't like. You'd be running into the problems that you don't like now, which is, you want the freedom, you want the creativity. And those are hard environments to work in, but look, it's good for somebody, right? The whole world's got to revolve around. Yeah. I think one of the problems though, Dominic, is that creativity sometimes leads a lot of people astray when it comes to like the fundamentals. Like, I think it's good that you were in corporate and in, management and running system, because a lot of people that jump into business entrepreneurship, let's say, right, they don't really have that, and maybe they're lucky to learn it, maybe they're not, and they fail and struggle, So
yeah, no, I think for me, and it's funny, I don't consider myself a creative person per se, especially like I grew up with creatives, right? I went to school at FIT. I saw like what
those are real creatives.
Yeah, exactly. Those are real creatives, like,
artists.
Yeah, I'm an artificial creative.
Right.
Like I'm creative for learning the job. Like it's like I like just a forced creativity in terms of like, whether it's social or anything like that. But realistically, like I am more of like a procedural, systems-oriented person, pattern recognition.
Right.
Like that's what I really like thrive in.
Yeah. But you're still creating it yourself. You're still dealing with it yourself. It's not, I think the two sides are like the financial side, like the numbers, and then the creative side, which I include everything in there, all the stuff to, whether it's marketing or building your systems or creating your management chart or whatever it is, it's still creative. It's not artistic, but
yeah, I think that's probably the right word. I'm not the artistic, right? I always knew I wanted to do something in like the physical space, especially after being in tech for so long. I was like, I don't feel attached to what I'm building, which is the main reason why I pivoted. Like I adored my team. I really liked my work, but I just didn't like my end product, which was something that I couldn't physically
feel and taste and
even though I came from the fashion space, I knew I didn't want to do something fashion related because it's very cyclical. It's sort of like trying to force someone to purchase something that they effectively don't need. And you have to come up with new products and be creative, right, every season. Where I wanted something that was more evergreen, where I could build a whole brand lifestyle around it that was singular, right? And so, I do like cooking a lot. So it was like, maybe I'll make a hot sauce one day. Maybe I'll make a spaghetti sauce or something like that, right? But this idea...
So you have a TikTok channel, right? And you're doing cooking and recipes and stuff on there all the time?
Yeah, so I actually made that. So after I incorporated Dirty Water in April of 2022, that September, I made a TikTok channel. I said, you know what? Let me make a TikTok. I always wanted to do like cooking content. But very like easy cooking content. So it's just like POV stuff. I'm just cooking whatever meal I'm making for the day and then just cutting it up. Very, very simple stuff. And I said, if this happens to blow up, then I'll just use it as a traction channel for Dirty Water. Yeah. And I happen to have miraculously 200,000 followers for whatever reason.
Right.
It's crazy how like, because I don't find my content to be high quality content, but it's engaging content. And I think that at the end of the day, that's what I learned a lot, is like how to create engagement on certain things. Because I'm able to like A/B test every day, right? It's like, let me do this sort of intro versus this sort of intro. And, I think that's what it's allowed me to do, is just test things and see and create my own hypotheses as to why things work or don't work.
So it was like almost a little test kitchen where you're doing your marketing. And then what happened? People started finding you, and next thing you know, you had a couple thousand followers, and it started growing from there.
It's really like this algorithm, like the TikTok algorithm works in very mysterious ways. And yeah, like you can put out content out there, and someone will find you, and then other people will engage, and then just kind of like it's this whole like building block.
Yeah, because you didn't like market it, right? I mean, you don't like post somewhere and say, "Oh, I have a TikTok channel, check it out." You just kind of kept posting content, right?
Yep, exactly. It's funny.
Crazy.
It was a 3-video process for me to start actually getting views. My first 2 videos, it was just testing the waters, testing the content format, and then my 3rd video, I was like, it's this one recipe I worked on for a long time. I said, okay, this is the video where if this does not get views into some capacity, then it's just like, it's not for me.
Yeah.
And then I made the video, posted it. It was about this, a duplicate of a very famous pasta recipe.
Okay.
Posted it up. It's a carbone, if you're familiar with it.
Yeah, sure.
Carbone spicy rigatoni, which I was like, this is the hook, right? I'm making from scratch the carbone rigatoni. And it happened to get, I think, like a couple 100,000 views.
Really?
Yeah. And that's how it went.
And you don't even know why? You think it was because of the recipe?
The recipe for sure. I think some of the other hooks at the beginning, but yeah, definitely like the recipe. And then that led me to doing other stuff. And it's funny, nowadays I see like the recipe itself does not matter. I could make the most boring thing. Instant noodles, for example.
Right?
Instant noodles, frozen dumplings.
Right.
That gets like 2 million views. Sometimes.
Really?
Yeah. And then I'll do this whole like 3-course dinner, going step by step, and that'll get me like 5,000 views. It's like, it's so funny how things work.
Well, maybe dumplings are just more popular. People are searching.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah. That's crazy. I never really thought about that stuff. Yeah. So do you have like cameras in your kitchen where you're like showing the pan? Like
no. So all it is actually, it's I have the camera here. It's a GoPro.
Okay. You just put it on your head.
Yeah. It's just a point of view thing like this.
Yeah.
I just walk around my kitchen because, like, for me, the main reason why I didn't start doing cooking content was because I don't like the content creation part of it. Right. I don't want to stage shots. I don't want to set up shots because that just creates a longer process.
A lot of work.
Yeah, I just cook dinner. So this format, I got it. I was inspired by this guy named the chef Kenji Lopez Alt. He does a POV style, and that's actually how I learned like the most in the kitchen of seeing how he handles knives, when he opens up his fridge, what it looks like. And so I found that to be the most
because they're like looking through your eyes, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like everyone can follow a recipe, but not everyone can say like, oh, he's doing this order of operations. He's moving around like this in a very specific way to be effective, in his kitchen. And so that's what I learned like the most in terms of cooking was, how to actually stage your own cooking setup for success.
It's amazing how I know we're getting all a little bit off the topic, but it's amazing how technology's changed to the point where you don't need like, 4 tripods and 3 cameras and set up this kind of stuff. It's almost put these guys out of business where you just strap this to your head and you can do anything you want.
And like, it's nice because it is one style of content. Some people are still doing the very produced, let's get 7 angles of this me cutting
but
chicken.
It's a lot of work.
It's a ton of work. If they make it work, if they get the views out of it, amazing.
Right.
I feel bad for the people that are doing all this like beautiful content and are not getting views.
Right. And it's not sustainable. I knew early on when I started the podcast, I've been doing this almost 6 years, right? I think next month there'll be 6 years. And I knew very early on that if I didn't do it in a certain way that was, easy for me to put together, I have somebody do the editing now, but that was just this past year. Before that, I did it all myself. So I was like, I had to have a system to be able to do this that's natural and can be put together, or I would just die on the vine. So if you're doing all this stuff, cameras or whatever, you're going to give it up. I mean, you're going to be like, oh, this is just too much. I can't do this today.
Especially if you're not getting views. Like, views are obviously the motivator. And if you're getting, not what you think is the juice worth the squeeze, right? Like you're not going to continue.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially even if you do have like very high quality content.
Right. But in your case, you're cooking. So you just strap the camera to your head and you could talk and just cook.
Yeah. And like, for me, and I think for better or for worse, right? I'm only doing stuff I cook, right? I'm only doing breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack, right? I'm not saying, okay, today I'm going to perfect a recipe just for video, right? Because people do that, right? Like it's like, oh, I worked on this recipe to make this video. I tested it 20 times last week, right? For me, it's just, if I'm testing a recipe, that is the video. That's
you're like,
my
it's lunchtime and we're making this, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's cool. Well, we'll have to put a link to the TikTok channel in the show notes, so people want to check it out. They can see
if it's still around. If it passed January 19th, it may be a dead link, but we'll see.
Right. All right. So, well, won't the content just stay out there?
I don't know how it's going to work, but I might just convert all my content to YouTube. I've been pretty lazy,
just in case like TikTok gets banned, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. All right. So let's talk a little bit about like the beverage industry and how you got interested in it. And then maybe at about 28 minutes, we'll take a 2-3 minute commercial break for the sponsors. And then we'll come back and talk, because I really want to learn about how you learned about the beverage business and so forth. So what attracted you to it initially? Because, Dominic, I have people on the show and they've been in business for 40 years and they've had all these companies they've sold. You're at the early stages with this company, which I think is great. And it's really cool to connect, and we'll see you grow and so forth. What make you wake up one morning and say, I'm going to make a hard seltzer?
Yeah. So thinking about my past ventures, right, within making these apps and they were all monetarily driven, right? It was like, I'm going to make this app, I'm going to make money, I'm going to sell it for an absurd amount of money, XYZ. And this was the first thing that I made where I was like, I'm ready to put a ton of money into this, a ton of time into this, because I want to see this in the market. This is a product solely made for me.
Okay.
And I thought, I think I have enough of a taste to know what other people may like as well. I think I have a relatable taste. And I was saying, so the idea of the product was, my favorite drinks of all time are just your really light, swelly beers, like PBR, High Life, Bud Light, Narragansett, Genesee, just very simple beverages that you could have with almost anything, right? Whether it's a hot dog, a dinner, it could be a nice dinner, an easy dinner,
Yeah, we're not talking craft.
Exactly. And any occasion, it pairs well with anything, right? Yeah. And those are my favorite things.
Okay.
And then I learned and discovered hard seltzer, right? And I was like, oh, these are great. But my one caveat is they're so flavor forward. They're either very tart, very sweet.
Very sweet, right?
And
they taste like soda. I mean, that's their audience. They're trying to reach the soda people that don't want to drink that tastes like alcohol. They want it so sweet. Right, exactly.
And so I was like, this format's great because it's 0 carb, 0 sugar, gluten-free, low cal. And that's something me getting older, it's I'm more conscious of what I put in my body, right? But I'm still going to drink.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I would love the feeling of drinking a light beer, but in a bit of a little of a healthier format.
Right.
And no one was really doing that. And healthier, but also singular in flavor, right? If I go to a bar and say, hey, can I name a hard seltzer?
Right.
They're going to say
high noon. They're going to ask you, what flavor do you want?
What flavor do you want? It's oh, well, you don't have the flavor that I like.
Right.
It's okay, well, that's a dead end, right?
Yeah.
These variety packs are crazy. I don't think they're great for a single consumer, right? Because you're not going to like all 4 flavors that are in a variety
usually
pack.
the 3 of the 4 flavors you don't like, they're pushing them on you.
Exactly, right? So I wanted something that was more economical, right? In terms of a hard seltzer, and also just again, simple and good for any occasion. And no one was making it. And I was like, I always wanted to get back into physical goods.
Okay.
I always wanted to try CPG.
CPG?
No one's doing this. I'm sorry?
CPG?
Yeah. Consumer produced packaged goods.
Okay.
And so.
Little acronym.
Yeah. And I was like, no one's doing this. Let me do it myself. I had the idea in 2018.
Okay.
Waited 4 years. And I was like, no one's still doing this. The hard seltzer market's still growing. It's consolidating, but it's growing, right?
Okay.
There's bad players, people came in because it was a bubble. They've fallen off. I consider it a mature market now. And the category is never going away. It's just going to kind of shift and grow.
Right.
And I was like, I think it's time for me to make it myself, because this is something I really want in the market. And I think, being able to sit on an idea, sit on it for a couple weeks, couple months, and if you still have the same conviction, I think that's the right litmus test for someone to really be able to go after it, right? And for me,
did you start out by really researching the beverage industry and the marketplace, and because obviously there's a lot of big competitors in the space. There's the beer companies that own seltzer brands, and that kind of stuff. Probably all the seltzer brands have some big beer company behind them. You don't even know about it.
Yeah, whether it's a spirit brand or a beer brand, there are a lot of companies that have parent companies for sure. Yeah, I did a lot of research because I think for me, this was a brand new industry, had no idea about
Right.
anything. It was a lot of just asking people who may know someone who's just like a little bit more knowledgeable than I am, right? And I think it's like the stepping stones
Yeah.
of growth. And yeah, like those are my earliest advisors of people who just worked for a beverage company,
Right.
right?
Okay.
And
So you found some people that you
yeah,
knew.
like just learning like the basics, like the strategy, and like maybe some of the steps along the way. I A lot of my early people I talked to, they were more on the strategy side
Hmm.
versus like the actual operations of like getting it from 0 to 1. How do I do formulation? How do I do X,
Right.
Y, Z? And like that was a lot of the stuff I had to learn on my own. And so I would just call up a warehouse. I'd be like, hey, like I want to make a hard seltzer. Like, what do I need? And like, oh, well, you need a formulation. You need to have it like federally approved. You need your TTB. You need this, this, this. So I called up all these different companies in the supply chain and being like, hey, I want to work with you. What do I need before? What do I need to do before I can work with you?
Oh,
And
that's
they
a good
would
answer.
like,
Okay.
and they would just kind of like list out things, and I would just go down the list, calling different companies, and figuring it out, getting multiple people's opinions from like the same vertical, right? So it's like if it's a flavor company or like a bottler, right? Talk to a couple different bottlers, see if they have the same answers, different answers. Yeah, and just working backwards. And
Yeah.
so
So all
that was
this
like
research is kind of going into your initial business plan, I guess, right? Your the initial plan, because it's not just making the product; it's all the other stuff that goes
Yep.
with running the business. And how do you do it? Do you find a co-packer? Do you didn't have 100 employees in a warehouse, so you
Exactly.
had to kind of figure it all out. So I think people listening always wonder about that stuff. Like, if I'm going to start a business, like, what do I do first? And
Yeah.
that's a
And
business where you're like, I don't know anything about this.
yeah,
You know,
thankfully, like now we have so many resources at our fingertips, whether it's Google, ChatGPT,
right? You
like
do a lot of
you
research.
can get like a starting point from there. It's like, how do I start a seltzer business, right?
Right.
And then from there, you could expand on your questions, get more knowledgeable, ask the right questions, right? And so for me, it really was finding out what my step 0 was,
Yeah.
and
Right.
then going
What
from
do you
there.
do first? Right. Day one. So
Yeah, and so
were people pretty open and helpful? Like if you called a supplier or a manufacturer or a warehouse or whatever, they were pretty forthright with
yeah,
helping you.
absolutely. Because I think at the end of the day, I found that the beverage industry, people are not, I'm not going to say not competitive, but they're very helpful. Everyone
Right.
wants to help each other. I think it's very community oriented because at the end of the day, it boils down to the service industry, hospitality,
Right.
and those people are the community around the hospitality industry is so warm and so like
Well,
inviting.
they're nice for a living. That's what
Yeah,
they do.
yeah, they are nice for a living.
It's hard to stay in hospitality if you're not a nice person and accommodating and warm and so it's
Exactly.
natural that they would be that way. Sure.
Yeah, and so like I think that is shown through a lot of the steps of the supply chain.
Okay, good. So let's take a few minute commercial break, and then I want to talk about some of the obstacles you run into and how you overcome them, and what you do. What do you think the hardest thing is, and what some things you're doing differently now. So let's take a quick break. We'll come back.
Sure.
Here's a word from our sponsors. Looking to market and grow your business? Or perhaps you're just getting started and want to hit the ground running? AWeber is the best choice for online email marketing and automation of your business. From maintaining a subscriber list to drip campaigns and landing pages, AWeber gives you tools and integrations that make marketing easy and fun. As our partner and sponsor, we use all their tools to promote the podcast and market our law firm. AWeber, the best alternative for online marketing. For over 30 years, the Alternative Board, or TAB, has built a thriving community of forward-thinking CEOs and business owners who want to radically improve their companies. Through unique combinations of one-on-one business coaching, participation in monthly TAB board meetings with other non-competing owners, a suite of strategic tools, and customized strategic planning workshops, TAB membership can deliver greater strength to your business and a better work-life balance for you and your family. All packaged in a streamlined and affordable service that the people at TAB invite you to try risk-free. Are you struggling with managing advertising due to a lack of time or expertise? Perhaps you're facing challenges in scaling ads for your store. Are you feeling lost when strategies have no success? GSM Growth Agency is your reliable partner in overcoming these business challenges. Feel the impact of collaborating with a team dedicated not only to short-term goals, but also to building long-term partnerships and achieving sustained success. Embark on an exciting journey to redefine the possibilities of e-commerce and create a legacy of unparalleled excellence. Take decisive action now. Follow their link in the show notes to receive a complimentary audit of your Shopify store conducted by a GSM expert. Propel your e-commerce game to new heights with GSM Growth Agency. Follow the link in the show notes to learn more about all of our sponsors. And now back to our show.
All right, Dominic, since this is the Accidental Entrepreneur and we're always talking to people about learning experiences and things they would maybe do differently or are doing differently, so initially, what do you think was the hardest part of, getting this business off the ground?
So initially, I would say like the first 2 years.
Yeah.
So I launched in May 2024. I started in April, started thinking about it and working on it in April 2022. The first year was pretty straightforward. It was just working on formulation with a flavor house, getting that initial formula correct.
So you're like testing and tasting and all that kind of stuff. Okay.
Yeah. I would say that there were a lot of woes during that period. My initial samples and some samples subsequently, I was just like, oh, this is never going to get anywhere. But that's a different story, right?
Yeah. No, you're self-doubt, right?
Yeah. Eventually, I overcame that, got a product that I was very confident in going to the market with. And then after that, then it was production, finding a pilot production, right, to do a very small batch for friends and family.
You can't just hire a warehouse to do pallets of this stuff.
Yeah.
You got to get a small batch kitchen, right, to do something, samples. Okay.
Exactly. So I did that, which was, again, very straightforward. People loved it, tested it with like some bartenders, some industry people, friends, families, to get a little bit of friends and family investment.
So you were on the road, like going to bars and saying, hey, listen, would you like try this with your customers? They're willing to do that?
So it was not just trying with the customers, but just trying it with them, because they're usually the guards of the bar, right? So it's like, if they don't like it, usually they won't put it in.
They're not going to push it. Right?
Yeah. And so trying it with some of them, some industry people, and it was pretty widely received as like, a really interesting and good product. And so that gave me confidence to do my first production run. And then that happened in April of 2024 and then launched May 2024. And then that's when the trouble started.
Yeah. Okay, good.
And by troubles, I mean definitely like learning experiences. So like, at the production side, I was like, oh, this is very seamless, very straightforward. I could see how
control
production,
the whole thing, right?
Yeah, I could see how production can get a little hairy once you start having like, different lead times with different production cycles and all of that. But that'll come eventually when, that's a good problem to have, right? Whenever you get to that point, if you have like, stacked production cycles, then that's great. But right now it's just one production, go, do another production, go.
Right.
And so my first production, getting into the market, for me it was like, okay, well, let me just start talking to some bodegas, some bars, see if they want to bring me in. I think founder-led sales is very underrated, and I think it's
as a good thing. You mean it's underrated?
Yeah, it's a really good thing, and it's easy. It's been easier than bringing in like some part-time salespeople to pitch the product.
Right.
Because as a founder-led salesperson, I have noticed one of the tough things within the alcohol bar business is bar people get pitched every day by 1,000 different alcohol brands.
Right.
Like every which way. And so, seeing a founder specifically, then they like stop and say, okay, this is interesting. Like, especially like a New York City based brand, New York City based founder.
Right. There's a good story behind it. Right. Yeah.
And so that was easy. And that was like, I think beginner's luck for maybe like a month. I was like, I'm landing like all these accounts. I'm in 20 places in the first 3 weeks. I could like, this is so sustainable. This is great. And then the first issue was, okay, well, I have to follow up with them for like the repeat orders.
Right. Because you don't know, maybe they don't sell it. Maybe they don't push it. Maybe it just sits there and they don't do anything. Yeah.
And so long story short, over the past 7 months, I've realized how hand-holdy the business is.
Right.
So people like when I talk with people who are very like knowledgeable in the space and have been in the industry for 20 years, I talk to them and they're like, oh, so you're like going out 7 days a week till like 2 a.m. And I'm like, underneath me, I'm like, I'm not doing that. Should I be doing that?
Right. Should I be out till all
I'm like,
hours of the
I'm
night?
finding a lot of success, or at least perceived success,
Right.
like doing like not till 2 a.m.
Now, are you getting repeat orders? Like they're
Yeah, like
reordering and
I'm
stuff?
getting some repeat
Okay.
orders. I'm doing these
Okay.
things, and then like, things started slowing down a little bit. I wasn't pitching to as many new accounts as possible because I realized like the AR part of it, where like chasing checks, making sure people are paying on time, making sure like all these other things that are like behind the scenes started taking up a lot of time.
And now at that time, it was basically you?
Yeah,
Get a couple of support people? Anybody?
yeah, some support, some part-time support, and I'm still actually on the hunt for my first full-time sales guy.
Okay.
So it is like still part-time people.
Right, because if you could use some of these sales guys that are hired guns, but they have a portfolio of stuff, so you don't know if they're pushing your stuff or whatever they think's going to sell, they're going to push.
Right, exactly.
Right.
And so, yeah, like my biggest thing was, making sure that my accounts were successful. And and then I started hearing this, oh, you're out till 2 a.m., you're out late nights every night of the week. How are you doing that? And then I started like doing these late weekends where I would like visit all of my bars.
Right.
And that's when I started getting like a lot of engagement. And it's like, oh, like the bartender will be there. Hey, what's going on?
Right. And they
Can we
already
get
know
5
you
more
a
cases?
little bit as well,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah, can we get 5 more cases? And like,
Right.
I was like, oh wow, me pitching during the day, because I always thought, oh, bars don't want to see me pitch during the evening because like they're busy, right?
Right.
Well, I would always go like right when a bar opens, and like I was like, oh, my prime times are between 2 p.m. and 6 or 7
Oh,
p.m.
it makes sense, right? Logically, you'd think, right?
And
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, that's the business, right? Like I do my meetings in the morning, my emails in the morning, do 2 to 7, and then after that, then what? My day's done.
Right.
But then I've realized very quickly that that's only part of it. The other part is, showing face to the bartenders, showing face to the people who are on the front lines, and those are the people that are working late.
Right. And once you have the account, you're saying you can't pitch cold on a Saturday night to some bartender who doesn't know who you are. But if you've already kind of landed them, then you gotta work the account.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah,
And so
sure.
then I realized, I was like, oh, I actually do have to be out pretty late nights meeting the people that are like, the first line of defense for dirty water, right? Which is the bartenders. And the best bartenders are the ones going to be working Friday, Saturday evening.
Yeah, they're the best. They get the most tips. They've been working the longest. They know the bar. People know them. They got regulars. Yeah, there's no question about it. But it's like any business, right? We're talking how to keep in touch with your customers. I mean,
Exactly.
your
At the end
customers
of the day,
are,
it's just
right, the
keep in touch.
bartenders.
Yeah. And so finding that cadence of how often should you visit was always like kind of like one of the things I was learning. And then I kind of like cracked the code, and then I'm like, oh, so this is kind of like what you should be doing. And then, I would say another thing that I would definitely have done differently, if I started over again, was, New York City is the most competitive market in the world.
Yeah.
And like, there's 100 bars every few blocks.
It's the best and the worst.
And it's when you think about building a product, right, and building visibility, you really do want to have a very concentrated push, right? Like, if someone goes into every single place that they normally go into, you want them to see Dirty Water or whatever product, and so they become like recognized with the brand.
Yeah, of course.
Which is why I would say like a lot of successful brands don't start in a major metropolitan area.
Yeah.
They start in your small suburb that has that single bar street that everybody in the county goes to.
Yeah.
That's like maybe 10 bars.
Much easier
Everyone
to focus,
knows everybody.
target. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's very concentrated, and the dollars go so much further there.
Right.
And you can get very huge like return very, very quickly.
Right.
I would say that would be the first thing I would have done differently if I had the choice. But for me living in the city, my backyard is New York City, for better or for worse. Right. And so that's where I'm starting. That's how I want to build a success story, because I think it really is true, especially with alcohol. And here, if you could make it in New York City, you can make it anywhere. And even if New York City is my only market, that is a major market to be in, and you could build an entire business just off of
there's no question about it. You're talking 15 million people between commuting in and out in suburbs, and plus you sell online, don't you, to wherever you can?
Yep, I sell online. I would say that's more of like a loss leader, because alcohol is very specific when it comes to online sales, especially something like my product that I want to be positioned as a more affordable option. Shipping is not cheap. With alcohol, there's an immediate like $10 charge for signature. right? A 21 plus signature,
Right.
which cannot be removed. And then, it's heavy, cheap liquid at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So
Right. Of course.
for me, it's more of a loss leader. But I want to make sure that if someone in Chicago, California
Was
really
here,
wants it,
right? Tried your stuff and then wanted to
like
order.
I'm not going to say no to a new customer or a potential super user at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the economics of the product. So when you started out, right? Because you're probably still on a relatively low run. You're not Budweiser, so Anheuser-Busch. So is there profit in small batch, runs, or is it kind of like, well, the profit margin's not great until we get up to a certain amount of volume in the beverage business?
So I would say it depends on what you want as your target price. So think about craft; they will always bake in their margin. So
right, because people are paying for it, they expect it to be more expensive.
Right. And so for me, my chicken and the egg was I want to be competitive with sort of your light, swelly beers, which happens to be cheaper, right?
Right, much cheaper. Yeah, sure.
And so I always want to be, it's not me undercutting the market. It's just where I want to be. Like my product is more aligned with that than your hard seltzer.
That's your customer, right? Because the customer who drinks Budweiser and they're going to turn to, I don't know, one of these craft hoppy IPA 16-ounce cans, they're going to be paying $32 or $40 for a 4-pack. They're going to be like, I'm not buying that.
Right. So for me, marketing aside, because marketing is always like a big loss, but like, direct conversion from cost to price to retailer, profitable off the bat, which is great, right? Very, very small margin. But the nice thing with my product is my formulation is so simple and the economies of scale, and being a single SKU product allows me to hit those economies of scale 4 times faster than any variety pack product, right?
Because you get different SKUs, you're only selling a percentage of the flavor.
Yep. And I only need to, so think about like small things in production, like boxing, right? A 4-pack, you have to box very specifically, right? A variety pack of 4 flavors, you have to box in very specifically.
Right.
That requires very specific machinery.
Yeah.
Or you do it by hand, which includes a labor cost, right? For me, it's a single SKU, so I could just box in, 1 flavor, big box, and it's much simpler. And that's why I think at scale, I'll be very, very competitive with the biggest hard seltzer, even past the biggest hard seltzer people, because of the way I'm positioned. And so I think that's where I can get really, really competitive as time goes on.
What scale? Like,
scale
10,000 units a run, or what?
Scale is defined as truckloads. So when you get a truckload of product, that's when a lot of prices start breaking pretty heavily. When you get tankers of liquid, truckloads of product.
Right. You're talking about like an 18-wheeler filled.
Exactly. Yeah. So a truckload is about 250,000 cans.
Okay.
Is a truckload, which is, I think,
that's a lot.
Like 8,000 cases.
Okay.
8,000 24-pack cases.
Right.
Your standard case size.
And are they 12-ounce cans, your product, or 16?
So mine's 12-ounce can, your standard stubby beer can, not
right.
your.
Well, that's the market you're in, right? That's what they're drinking. So how much? So if you look at one particular local bar that's a fairly regular customer, how much are they buying on a regular basis? Like how big is an order? One bar.
So usually like a small brand, a good bar will buy in maybe 5 or 6 cases a week, which is like really, really good for a brand new brand.
Right.
But to put that into perspective, some of your biggest brands, right? Like the biggest seller of PBR in the country, I think, goes through, I could be making these numbers up or mixing them up, I think like 300 cases a day, right?
Well, to the overall, to the whole country?
No, to that one bar.
Oh, so the bar goes through 300 cases, the equivalent of whatever?
Yeah, it's either a day or a week, but it is like that high of a velocity.
It's gotta be a week, yeah.
Yeah, but it's known as like the biggest PBR bar. So like, the scale ranges wildly. I would say like the metric is if you're doing at least like a case a week, you're not doing bad, right? For a small brand. But
with
for
a
me,
bar for one particular customer.
Yeah, for one particular bar. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So if they're reordering once a month, then that's not a bad starting point as a small brand.
So
But ideally,
so they'd be ordering 4 cases a month, basically.
yeah, 4 or 5 cases a month. Exactly.
4 or 5 cases a month. Okay, but that's very far from a truckload. So
exactly. So
you got to have a lot of market penetration.
Yep, a lot of market penetration or just good repeat customers. Like if you're doing standing orders of 5 cases a week, over like 50 accounts, that could warrant you a truckload of product.
That makes sense, right? Yeah, exactly. Because then you're doing 5 cases a month. 50 is 250,000, right? 250 cases.
Can't do the math in my head, but it's something where it's like I think every 3 or 4 months I need to be doing a new production run.
New production run. Is the product more like just like a club soda with alcohol, or is it?
So there's 2 ways to make hard seltzer. There's your spirit-based and then your malt-based. I'm a malt-based hard seltzer, and so the spirit-based is literally, like as you mentioned, your liquor and your soda water, and that's what High Noon is. Neutral is that, and some of the other ones. And anything that says like tequila seltzer or tequila or like vodka, it's going to be
hard liquor in it, right? Of course.
But you have your malt-based, which is White Claw. Actually, a lot of the other ones are malt-based. White Claw, even like Topo Chico. I'm malt-based, Truly. And so what malt-based is, it's called sugar brewing, is the fermentation process where they take sugar water and they ferment it. The sugar itself comes out, turns into alcohol. And that is how the base of the product is made. And then you just add in your water to balance it out. You add in some bubbles, some carbonation, and then you add in like your flavorings.
Got it. So that's true for malt beer too, right? When you talk about malt liquor.
Yeah. So basically, it's the same process without the hops, right?
Makes sense.
The reason why, and this gets into the little like weeds of like the New York City alcohol laws.
Okay.
Well, malt is also cheaper than spirit-based.
Okay, good. Yeah.
And then 2, in New York City, I know you don't have this problem in Jersey, but in New York City, liquor and wine cannot be sold in the same place as beer. So
liquor and wine cannot be sold even in the bar?
Well, so a bar is different.
We're talking a store.
Like at a store. So like at a gas station.
Different license or something? Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's different licensing, and it's just the way it works.
So there's a beer license, and then there's a liquor and wine license, but you can't have both.
You can't have both, right?
Wow.
So
I thought New York was like the Wild West. You can go to 7-Eleven and get whatever you want.
So yeah, you can go to 7-Eleven, you can get your beer, right?
But there's no wine in 7-Eleven?
There's no I think there's like a law where it's like you could do like one SKU of wine, but like you have like a wine.
You can't get a fifth of Fireball whiskey there.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
And then you have your separate liquor stores, which have your full wine selection, and then your liquor, right?
And they don't have beer? No, they do have beer.
They don't have beer.
They don't have beer, not in New York.
I know in Jersey, you have your standalone
liquor
stores have everything, but you can't get beer at a grocery store or convenience store.
Correct, because they limit the licenses based on population, and then the towns give them out to just the liquor stores.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so here in New York, you get beer at a convenience store.
Okay.
But you get liquor and wine at a liquor store. And so for me, for example, High Noon here in New York City is not sold in the same place as White Claw. High Noon is sold at a liquor store
because it's spirit-based. I didn't know that.
White Claw is sold in convenience stores.
Yeah, because it's a beer-based, basically, in the category. That's interesting. I've always wondered why. Oh, what do you mean you don't have this here? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so for me, I want to be positioned alongside your light beers, and then also some other hard seltzers, right? And so for me, being malt-based was the only logical decision because I needed to be in with.
You wanted to be in that market, right? That's the product you were developing.
Exactly. And so that's like the one nuance as to why I am malt-based, but also the affordability of it, which is really nice.
Now, when you started developing the product, this wasn't something you could do in your kitchen, right? I mean, you had to go to a company that could create product for you based on your formulation, and then you could test it, right?
So it's funny. I hear so many stories about people starting up their products in their kitchen, which people do.
Yeah.
But at some point, you have to do the FDA approved shelf-stable, shelf life whole thing, in which case you need to bring in a flavor house to do benchtop samples for you.
Right.
And so I just skipped the step of I'm not a mad scientist, so I'm not going to do stuff.
And then you got to create a a recipe that you have to be careful with. Then you got to go to the commercial guy and see if they can reproduce it. And there's a whole
That's something that's viable, right?
Yeah.
And so I just skipped that step. I worked with a flavor house to get my production made.
All right, so let's talk about how you run the business right now, because you were mentioning you're looking for a salesperson. But I mean, is the business being run by you?
Yeah.
All
So,
the bookkeeping, the ordering, the testing, everything.
I would say bookkeeping, thankfully.
Yeah.
My wife is an accountant, and she has experience in cost accounting, very specifically.
Okay. Oh, okay.
And so, yeah, you can say match made in heaven, but we butt heads a lot. We are
still
not
within the family, though. We're not talking outside employees.
Yeah. So not an outside employee there, but I do have some part-time salespeople that been helping me out, very part-time, commission, and then small salary basis. But no full-time employees that are out in the weeds 50, 60 plus hours a week, the way that I am.
Now, is this full-time for you? Like you give up your job and you're like, I'm doing this?
Yeah. So I made this decision right before I launched. Actually, I went full-time, never looked back. I've been loving it. I have realized, because when I started, doing the formulation and stuff, I was working a full-time job.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, I could totally do this part-time.
Right, 'cause you're not selling anything, no revenue.
Get some people in.
Yeah.
And then as soon as I started doing the work, being out in the street, I'm like, oh, there was no way I could have sustained even a part-time job doing this. It's just because the second you do something else, your focus, even if it is a part-time job, your focus is shifted. You're not fully ingrained in the business.
Yeah.
And you're always thinking about something else. You're always thinking about, I have that meeting with whoever it is for something else that you have to do, a standing meeting or whatever it is. Right.
I think a lot of business don't get off the ground because they don't make the leap and say, all right, I'm putting all my feet in the water. Let's do this, and it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah. So it really is a make or break year for me, which I'm very excited about.
So what is the vision of the business plan? Are you working out of your home right now because you don't really need an office?
Yeah, working out of my home because all my
product comes from it's all co-packed basically, right?
Yeah, all co-packed, all stored in a warehouse. I can't even really have much product in my home because of liquor laws or whatever.
Right.
Well, if I buy it at retail, then I could have as much product as I want. It's so convoluted. I feel like it's some of the laws are backwards, but they're very antiquated and they're going to stay forever.
Do you know about the distillery laws in Manhattan? There's crazy laws in Manhattan. There's one distillery in Manhattan. It's called Great Jones. I don't know if you're into bourbon or other.
I do know Great Jones, yeah. Yeah,
Great Jones is great. Well, Great Jones is the only distillery in Manhattan because there's some weird rule that says that you can only I think you can't distill on the second floor of a building, and you can only fill up a certain amount of barrels and keep them. So they move them upstate within a week. It's some weird process in New York City. We got some really weird laws.
I learn a new alcohol law every week. One I learned from a bartender is when you do your level checks for all the liquors, you cannot combine two bottles. So even if it's 2 bottles of Tito's and they're halfway, you can't combine them. It's illegal.
Right.
But I do it at home. if I have 2 bottles of Tito's, I'm going to.
But it makes no sense why you can't do that.
Yeah, but there's something about it where it's just illegal. People have gotten fired over it. People have gotten fined.
Yeah, that has to do with the liquor industry. They don't want you to. Now, do you have to get licensed or approved somehow in other states if you're selling online? So if somebody from Chicago wants to buy your hard seltzer, do you have to be somehow registered in Illinois?
So thankfully, there are third-party, companies that
handle
allow for that 3-tier system bridge.
Yeah.
Which is I use one of them right now, and it allows me to sell into 45 states.
Yeah, because I do know I have a client who's got a tequila brand. He owns a bar, and they wanted to go into some other states, and there are licenses they're selling, delivery licenses, distributing licenses you have to get. It's not as hard as the initial license of creating the product and bringing it here and so forth. But
honestly, every other license is just a couple $100.
Right. It's not.
You're now in another state.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so, but that's if I wanted to do actual distribution.
Yeah, if you said, okay, now we're going to sell to bars in Connecticut or we're going to sell to bars in Massachusetts, you'd have to, but that service can do that for you, right? They can get you licensed to do it?
Yeah. So right now I'm licensed in New Jersey, New York. So I'm going to start there. And then my goals for this year, grow into, so right now, continue to penetrate New York City, grow into Long Island and New Jersey. Mm-hmm. And then I think my beverage is a very from a story perspective, very Northeast beverage, right? I think the Northeast demographic is very familiar with this type of beverage. Again, like your Genesee, Narragansett, these are all, Northeast style drinks. And so I think this starting regionally here, I think Boston's going to be a great market. And then even start going a little bit south to like Memphis and, Chicago, I'd love to get into too. Pennsylvania.
Nashville.
Too.
Right.
Yep. Nashville.
So is it more profitable to sell through a store like a bodega or something like that versus at a bar, which is the...
So it effectively is the same. Some places, and depends on the state, there's so many different state laws in terms of what you can sell for different prices. So in New York City, I could sell different prices to different people.
Yeah.
In New Jersey, it's a control. There's a control around the pricing. So I have to sell the same exact price to everyone. So my price has to be posted at the beginning of the month.
Interesting.
And so whether it's like a bar or a liquor store or wherever it is, it's the same exact price, same exact discounts, and it's very visible on the New Jersey site. And so
you can't like say, hey, listen, if you buy 10 cases a month, I'll sell it to you for this price. You can't do that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Unless
can't
you
do that.
offer to everybody. Right.
Yeah. So to answer your question though, if you do a grocery store or like a bodega, it's a small volume comparatively. Right. Sometimes bars could be your best sellers, but at scale and when you really have a name for yourself, it really is those grocery stores that keep the lights on. Because if you think about it, someone's buying a 6-pack versus buying one at a bar.
Right. Exactly.
Right? And to you, you're selling out for the same price to a grocery store and a bar.
Right. You want them to move volume.
So it's the higher volume places that are going to be the more impactful. But you build your visibility and your business at the bars, which is why I'm focusing on.
Yeah, that's true. That's the brand recognition. Yep. The bartender saying, "Hey, you should try this stuff. We get this new thing, whatever." So, are you like showing up and giving them merch? Like you're saying, "Here, we're giving you a box of T-shirts and give them out to people," or pens or markers.
There are like merch incentives. It can get really tricky though with like the type of POS or merch you give to bars, especially if they're not like.
Because there's rules, right?
There is rules about like how much stuff you can give per like month to a bar, and like that's another whole like slew of rules.
Right.
That
it's tough market. You add alcohol to your product, and it's a different world.
Yep, and there's a lot of bullies in this space too. The bigger companies.
Yeah, sure. Pushing you, they don't like it, right?
Push you out, but no, it's fun though. I would say out of everything, this is what I've been really enjoying. It's so funny, chasing $100 check from a bodega now is like, I love it. It's surreal compared to like, monopoly money in like the tech space. Right.
Right.
But like, it feels like genuine and earnest. So I like
that. Yeah. So what's the business plan in terms of next phases? You look at, you're going to be growing a team, you're going to get space, you're going to start
growing a team, going for a seed round.
Okay.
Yeah, going for a seed round.
Going for a seed round. Okay.
Yeah, probably the second half of this year, going to be prepping up for a seed round. I am launching a second product, so I'm launching a Delta 9 THC version of Dirty Water.
Delta 9, yeah.
Which is very popular right now. It's a huge space. Margins are very, very nice in the Delta 9 category.
Yeah.
And so, going to be doing a small test production run, either late Q1, early Q2 of this year.
That's state specific. So if you want stuff in New York, it's got to be made in New York.
It's different rules about it, especially with e-commerce. But that's a whole other conversation. But I will be testing Delta 9.
Delta 9 is cannabis.
Yeah,
right?
Delta 9.
Delta 8, Delta 10 are different.
So Delta 8 and Delta 10 are synthetic. Delta 9 is the real stuff. It's just
regulated.
Yeah. But it could be sold not in a dispensary, which is like the big caveat. And what makes Delta 9 so appealing is like you can see it at a convenience store. You can see it at your local Total Wine or like Beverage Barn.
Even in New Jersey, they don't.
Yeah. So actually, if you go to some of the liquor stores there, you will see small sections of just Delta 9 THC products. Right. Because they are trying to bring in a lot of brands to make those end caps bigger.
Got it. All right. So before we go, and we'll put your links in the show notes, how to get a hold of you. We'll put the TikTok link, the whole thing. What would you say advice to somebody starting their own business in terms of, not necessarily in the drink space, it could be, but, a little bit of advice if you hear some people listening out there and they're thinking, I have a job, I got an idea, I want to get started. What would you say would be one or two things that you'd recommend for them to do?
Yeah. So I would say you don't need to go completely full head on and quit your job and then go into something else. I think there's ways to litmus test the idea, right?
Yeah.
You know, find what is like your most valuable product.
Yeah.
Get it out there. Get it in front of your golden consumer, right? Get your first person who loves the product, test it out, and then slowly scale out from there. And then you will kind of know when the time is right to go full head on into it.
Right.
But yeah, I think, it's about finding conviction is the first thing. If you really want to be sure on yourself in terms of starting a company, get a product you can get behind. I think
right.
a lot of
It'll
people
be hard. It'll be hard with the stuff you believe in, let alone the stuff you're unsure of.
Exactly. I think a lot of people fall into the trap of getting into products or getting into a business just because they want to work for themselves.
Right.
It doesn't really work like that.
Right.
Find something that you can talk about day and night, every which way to anybody, and then go from there.
Right. Because you may have to go out in the middle of the night and go to the bar and visit people and shake hands with the bartender. All right, Dominic, I can't thank you enough. Stick around. Let's play the credits. And we'll follow you. I'm going to look for your stuff in New York. My son lives there. And we'll give it a try.
Mitch, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Accidental Entrepreneur. Opening and closing music written and performed by Howie Moskovich and made to order music. For information about Howie and his music services, please follow the link in our show notes. If you like the podcast, please tell others about us. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, on Amazon Music, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and most of the other podcast directories. If you like what you hear, please leave us a 5-star review and feel free to share our episodes on social media. If you have any questions or comments, ideas for the show, or you'd even like to appear as a guest, reach out to us by email at info@beinhackerlaw.com.
The Accidental Entrepreneur is hosted by Mitch Beinhacker and produced by Beinhacker Law. If you'd like to learn more about our business and legal services, you can find us on social media or visit our website at beinhackerlaw.com. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe to our feed to be notified of all future episodes.